This is the ocean. It covers 2/3 of the planetary surface and it's home to 78% of all animals in terms of biomass. And this is an example of AI architecture called Transformer. All living things on the planet or natural ecosystem services give us $140 trillion a year. You can compare it to the global GDP, which is just $100 trillion. Oceans capture 31% of CO2 and also produce over 50% of oxygen on the planet. And the Transformer, together with other AI architectures, powering so many technologies, starting with Google Translate, Shazam, recognizing your music, comprehensive medical screening, even self-driving cars. And also it's powering these. These are large-scale AI models trained on massive amounts of data and adapted to perform various tasks, starting from creating deepfakes to helping students cheat on their homework. And now people are working on foundation models for chemistry, physics, robotics, geospatial data, and many more. In 2022, generative AI market was around $40 billion. And according to Bloomberg, it will grow to $1.3 trillion in the next decade. Over a year ago, I left my dream job at Google X to become homeless. To create a startup in ocean biodiversity with the goal of creating foundation models for biodiversity. If we as humanity achieve this, this will change everything, every single aspect of our interactions with nature. I'm gonna share my journey and together we explore ocean biodiversity AI space and see how we can solve main challenges there. In 2016, I finished my master's degree in computer science, which was about 3D reconstruction and markerless motion capture. Right after that, I started working on Google Maps on improving spatial accuracy of satellite images. Our team was stitching satellite images together and also doing 3D reconstructions of buildings and many other things. In 2017, I moved to London to work on Google Ads, on monetization. We had massive systems processing petabytes of data, all sorts of ad impressions, clicks and things like that, calculating how much money to give everyone for publishing ads. So for example, if you're a YouTuber, we would calculate how much money to give you and pay you. In early 2020, I started working at Google X on the project about bees. Google X, also called X the Moonshot Factory, is a semi-secret part of Google working on lots of crazy technologies, starting from self-driving cars to some sort of hot air balloons, giving internet. And my project was about listening for bees buzzing using IoT devices and then using machine learning to try classify diseases of the bees, are there any ants in the colonies, or is the queen happy, basically modeling beehive strength. And then we scaled to pest management problem. In general, all insects are dying. We have about 15% of insects left compared to what was 60 years ago. So it's massive biodiversity crisis. And one of the biggest drivers of biodiversity decline is the use of pesticides. We spray toxic chemicals everywhere and we kill all sorts of life. So in our project, we were trying to come up with solutions to reduce the use of pesticides. For example, we had lots of sensing solutions to measure where different insects are, like pheromone traps, acoustic traps, sticky traps, drones. We built like custom habitats with cameras or like linear irrigation systems with cameras. So we get all of this information together, join it with environmental data like local weather stations, and then we model population dynamics of those insects, for example, where they're gonna be in a few days from now, so that instead of spraying the entire field based on the calendar, you can spray only a small patch of it like a few days earlier, or use different other methods like biocontrol when you increase amount of predator species, or mating disruption strategies and many other things. So that was my previous job. And I really love oceans. So I'm a scuba diver, I love diving everywhere. At the same time, I'm really bad at swimming. I sink quite well, so I decided to work on my strength and train free diving. So these days I do a lot of scuba diving and free diving, and we even open our free diving club Apnea UK here in London. Ocean means a lot to me, and unfortunately it's dying. In general, we lost 69% of all living things on the planet over the last 50 years. Ocean is not an exception. For example, we're killing 100 million sharks a year. Bottom trawlers wipe out 8 million square kilometers every year, which is comparable to the size of Brazil. Also, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch is 1.6 million square kilometers. Imagine the area of France, Italy and Spain full of plastic everywhere. And different animals, for example turtles, they don't have reflexes to throw up a bottle. They would just die without being able to eat, which is absolutely devastating what we do. How do we fix all of the mess we are causing? We must stop planetary level self-destructive behavior as quickly as possible. What would you do if you wanted to become rich? On one side you need to earn more, and on the other side you need to spend less. And I would say earning more matters way more. Don't listen to my advice because I'm poor. Similarly, to establish a healthy balance between humans and nature, we need to conserve and restore more, and also we need to destroy less. Let's look together at the biggest challenges, what stops us from doing that. So the first problem is funding gap. Here is an example. Coral reefs, one of the most biodiverse ecosystems on the planet. It supports 25% of all marine life and doing many other things. And also we are on track to lose 90% of them by 2050. Altogether, in the previous decade, only $258 million were invested into coral reef restoration. That might sound like a lot, but if we Google a price of one Boeing 747, it would be over $400 million. Just only think of that. Over 10 years, entire humanity donated less than one airplane to one of the most important ecosystems on the planet. This is ridiculous. The other problem is broken incentives or goal alignment. Quite often, short-term business goals are not aligned with long-term goals of health of humanity and nature. Businesses lack transparent mechanisms on monitoring, reporting, verifying biodiversity metrics, and also measuring impact on the ecosystems. Another challenge is slow response. Protection of endangered species is slow. Detection and management of invasive species is really slow. That's why we have like lionfish everywhere. Restoration efforts like seagrass, mangroves, oyster reefs, slow. Response to environmental threats like harmful algae blooms are not efficient, unfortunately. We need to accelerate all of that somehow. The other challenge is our limited understanding of nature. Nature is really complex. It's very large, intricate systems, and we don't really understand what's happening under the hood. It's hard to quantify ecosystem services, what nature gives us, and also really hard to assess how we impact in nature. I'll give you one example where we understand nature really well. Most of you probably heard it. It's a story about wolves in Yellowstone. By 1920s or 30s, all wolves in Yellowstone were completely hunted down. In early 90s, scientists decided to make a controversial decision and bring wolves from Canada and reintroduce them back into Yellowstone. Because all of that time ecosystems were out of balance, there was so much deer at the Yellowstone, or elk. So wolves started hunting down elk, and the population of elk decreased. Their patterns of behavior changed a lot. They stopped overgrazing trees so much, and because trees became more healthy, it affected lots of other things. For example, when the rain falls, large creeks started to appear, and once there were creeks, beavers came and started making dams. Gradually over time, those creeks became full of water and became rivers. And those rivers and more healthier forests became habitats to hundreds of other species, including bears. And so population of bears became much larger. Imagine on one side you reintroduce wolves into the ecosystem, and then less than in 10 years you get water in the rivers which were dry for 70 years, and also you would have bears and many other species. This is an example of trophic cascade or predator-prey dynamics. Imagine if we could 100x these scenarios across the planet and make our ecosystems healthier and really deeply understand what's happening under the hood. I see at least two technological challenges hindering this progress. One of them is data wrestling for ecologists. Ecologists or wildlife biologists or all sorts of biodiversity researchers, they're brilliant. They know their domain really, really well. They know how sharks behave, how to protect nature. However, they're not really engineers which could build massive distributed systems in the cloud to process all the data. And these days, 80% of challenge is just to clean up the data, process it, and prepare it for analysis. Another challenge is data fragmentation. We have a huge amount of data already about nature, but it's all fragmented. It's all in different locations, different formats, different systems. It's private, public. It's really, really hard to find data for your research and make some sort of decisions or run some quick analysis about nature. Everyone has different obsessions. As an engineer, I'm really obsessed how information or data flows through space and time. This is usually called data flow. For example, if you Google something, you type your search query and get results within milliseconds. This is normal and ordinary. It's so much complex engineering happening under the hood. So for example, when you type your query, the data flies to the GFE Google front end, where it hits a load balancer, does SSL termination, then it goes to some microservice processing this data. For example, at some point it hits Spanner database, and Spanner is a planetary scale high-performance database where engineers used atomic clocks to hack CAP theorem to keep everything in sync. There's a really crazy amount of engineering going to return you results within a few milliseconds. Super fascinating how it works. You can read the SRE book if you want to know more. Same way, it was really fascinating how data flows through space and time at my previous job, where we worked on pest management. So we had lots of different sensing solutions, for example, pheromone traps, acoustic traps, sticky traps, drones, linear irrigation systems. This way we could know where different insects are. So for example, we took a picture of a Colorado potato beetle from the drone. Then we run computer vision model to extract the information. For example, here we have the beetle. We know location and time where it was captured. This information is called time series geospatial biodiversity data. It will be joined with environmental data from like local weather stations, wind or temperature and other weather conditions. And then you feed all those stuff into machine learning models, modeling the ecosystem, modeling population dynamics of insects. And those predictions go to some user interface where some pest control advisor knows where the pest outbreak is going to happen. They could see it on the heat map or the dashboard. It would be fair to say this data flow following 3 steps: measuring, modeling, and then acting. If your goal is to forecast harmful algae bloom, you're doing something very similar. You get the data through remote sensing, like satellite data or drones, maybe environmental DNA. If you don't know what environmental DNA is, very simple. The idea is, let's say you are salmon, you swim in the river, and then you drop your cell, and then scientists came and did the probe of the water, and then they ran PCR test and figured out, oh, there was salmon. It's very similar to COVID tests. There is of course way better technologies like metabarcoding and maybe other ways of doing environmental DNA, but this is a basic principle. So you get the data about algae, then you join it with environmental data like currents or water temperature, and then you model population dynamics of algae. You can know when it's gonna be in a few days. So this way you can model outbreak of algae and then take some action. Now let's have a look at the data flow for creation of marine protected areas. On one side you have a lot of sensing solutions, for example drones, bioacoustic microphones. It's like if you heard of like Shazam for birds, for example, similar way you can detect whales, or BROV style underwater cameras, like acoustic tags, satellite tags, and multiple other ways of measuring biosphere. Then you basically try to model all of this data, you figure out where the cluster of the most important fish, and then you create a polygon around this area called marine protected area to protect the fish. So you have the same step of measuring, modeling, and acting in the real world. Of course, it's way more involved than I described. So for example, underwater cameras captured some fish, then scientists maybe distribute 400 hours of underwater footage among students, then they look for max n, like how many organisms are in one frame for the same species. Then they try to maybe measure the size of the fish using stereo cameras. This way they could estimate biomass. Then all of this data goes into some like spreadsheet or CSV file. Then they clean up the data using maybe Kalman filter. Then they join this data with environmental data, maybe from Copernicus, which includes like water salinity, chlorophyll levels, sea surface temperature, and like many others. Basically, it goes from like one document to another document into some PDF, and then like policymakers could see a pie chart or whatever and decide, okay, we need to create a marine protected areas here. Last year I spent over a month in Mexico with a shark conservation project called Pelagios Cacunja. They're really good. They're protecting lots of different species of sharks, and they told me it's really important to iterate quickly when you create in marine protected areas, because political will could change, climate change, so many factors involved there. However, it takes over 5 years to create one marine protected area if you succeed. And also the data analysis part take over a year. And these kind of stories I can hear everywhere when I talk to ecologists or marine biologists. I will share with you other data flows related to nature conservation tech in separate videos, but what we can notice here is that we always follow the same steps as like measuring, modeling, and acting. And it's not some magic coincidence that we have those steps. This thing, usually called cybernetic loops. Cybernetics is a part of systems theory. Usually those loops called perception, prediction, and then control. But measure, model, act is basically the same thing. And these patterns happens everywhere across biological systems, technology, even our nervous system. For example, you go to the kitchen, you touched hot frying pan and you instantly snatch your hand away. This is you following the same measure, model, act, feedback loop, cybernetic loop. Alternatively, if you saw a frying pan and then you decided, oh, I'd better not touch it because it's super hot. This is the same feedback loop. So you measured with your eyes and then you run the model, you decided that it's gonna be hot, so better not touch it. And then you didn't touch it, so not taking action is also action. It's basically exactly the same what is happening in our nervous system and what is happening with nature when we're trying to protect it. The only difference is that in our case it takes you milliseconds to react. However, in nature it takes 5 years to take action. It's like you are staying on the railway and you can see approaching train and you cannot move for 5 years. This is what actually happening in the nature. So now you understand what is a digital nervous system for the planet. On one side we have lots of sensing solutions measuring biosphere. On the other side we have actions, for example, where to create offshore wind farm, where to extract lithium, where to create marine protected areas, how to protect coral reefs, and many other things. And in the middle we have all sorts of data flows, research workflows, and we have lots of modeling happening there. For example, ecological niche modeling, population dynamics, predator-prey dynamics, and many other things. That's our nervous system. And the problem is that at the moment it's very weak, it's very fragmented, and we need to strengthen it. We need to accelerate those feedback loops. We need to create highways, standardized data highways, taking data from the sensors, joining it with environmental data, and where we could run models against this data so that we can react quicker. Ideally, it should be a real-time system, so we get the data from all sorts of devices across the planet, and then if something happening, for example, turtles swallowing the bottle, we can instantly react. We don't wait 5 years when the population of turtles declined completely. We need to improve the system, and it needs to be real-time long-term. In the middle of this system, we have all the models trying to make decisions about protecting nature. It's kind of one big brain which understands all the ecosystems. At the moment it's very fragmented, usually we have just like statistical models doing something, but with time it's getting better and better. I think it's just a matter of time, maybe 10-20 years, when we have this mega brain which comprehensively understands ecosystems, like can represent them and can feel where it hurts, how we affect them, how those ecosystems affect us. And foundation models is a really good candidate to become this brain. We just need to have access to a lot of data to train those models. Luckily we already have a lot of data, huge amounts of data. It's called the Tsunami of data. There's a really good article in Nature highlighting the fact that in 2018 we had way more ocean data than in the entire previous century, and it's growing exponentially. So now we have a huge amount of data. The problem, it's all scattered across different organizations, across different formats, and it's not easily accessible. So we need to organize the world's biodiversity information and train those models against this data and run analytics against that. And then the second challenge with the data is where to collect the new data. We all know that oceans are less explored than the outer space. We don't have much data in the deep sea, we have less data in the global south, but it's not clear where to just go and collect the data. So we need both. We need better utilization of existing data, making it accessible and understanding it. And also we need to guide efforts where to collect the new data. One of the possible solutions would be creation of federated data networks similar to what we have in healthcare, so that we can train models across all the data and we can also run analysis across all the data. This way we can move forward. Another aspect is that AI can help us better utilize existing data, which we usually would throw away and not use. One core key concept called multimodality. Similar to us, that we can see or smell or taste or feel some touch or hear, same way AI models could process multimodal data. So for example, if you are a self-driving car, you get data from multiple different sensors and then you drive it in the right direction. Same way we have all these sensors measuring biosphere, let's say Shazam for birds, bioacoustics or soundscape ecology, underwater cameras or environmental DNA, and many others. We do have already architecture for multimodal AI systems which could fuse all of this data together and create a comprehensive understanding of ecosystems. And multimodality is really important. For example, you are cycling in London, so you see what's in front of you using your vision, and then someone behind you is like beep beep pressing the horn. So you instantly get this information through your ears so that you recreate your understanding of what's happening around you. So you instantly like, oh my gosh, I'm in danger, let me pull to the side of the road so that you can save yourself. The same way we need all available modalities in nature. For example, environmental DNA is limiting because you don't know what was the abundance. It can only understand like relative abundance and not very well. And if you use vision, you don't see at night, or if the water is murky, you also don't see it. If you use bioacoustics, you don't hear because not all animals make sounds. So we need to utilize all available modalities to better represent the system. So this would be a downstream technology from all the sensors. At my previous job at Google X, we had a concept of moonshots or audacious challenges. There might not be really good reasons for humans to be physically on the moon. However, this is a moonshot. It's easily understandable, relatable by anyone. And if we work towards this goal all together, it will create a lot of kind of industries, technologies around this. For example, we might get a microwave as a byproduct. So in the same way, creating foundation models for biodiversity is also a moonshot. If we create this mega AI brain, which could be just a collection of different models, which would deeply understand ecosystem dynamics similar to wolves in Yellowstone, and if it would understand how nature impacts humans, for example, ecosystem services, how much oxygen it produces, how much carbon it takes out from the atmosphere, how much it affects nitrogen cycle, and how humans affect nature, for example, where do we hurt it and what's happening under the hood. This kind of technology will change everything, every single aspect of our interactions with nature. So basically this is the mission of Wildflow: get to those foundation models as quickly as possible. We want to enable comprehensive comprehensive understanding of nature and then align all the human activities with it. This mission is way bigger than our startup, so we need to work on this together. It will give opportunity for a lot of sensing companies producing sensing solutions and measuring nature. Also, it will give a lot of opportunity for people applying those models. Many $1 trillion questions is how do we get to those models? To train the models, you need a huge amount of data. So it becomes a quest of how do you get all this data. There is maybe 5 different ways of how do you get the data. One is partnerships, another way is through open data platform, marketplace, buying data or measuring data yourself. We'll follow all of that in the priority order. Our platform would have 3 major components. One is data, think of this as YouTube for biodiversity. Second is tools, think of this as a snowflake for biodiversity. And the last component is models, think of this as Hugging Face for biodiversity, so that you can run models or analyze the data in the cloud that you have. And then at the beginning we'll have very simple statistical models, and then at some point we'll have enough data to train foundation models for biodiversity, so it becomes OpenAI for biodiversity. If someone solves the data problem for us, like creates a data platform, we'll be only happy and focus on the modeling where our strength is. But for now we'll need to build all of this step by step. We're starting with infrastructure and tools to empower biodiversity researchers. All of this is way bigger than a tiny startup Wildflow. If this resonates with you, please join us on the mission to comprehensively understand nature and align human activities with it. See you.